Hello and welcome to Wilson's World Afcon Daily Day 1. Now, as you can probably tell, I'm not actually in Morocco right now. I'm in southwest London. I'll be going out to Morocco on January the 1st. But these daily briefings will be coming out every day, apart from Christmas Day. I'm not completely insane. And the idea is there'll be a little bit of a diary, tell you what I've been doing, looking back at the day's play, looking back at the big stories of the day, and looking ahead to the day to come. So, yeah, hopefully a little daily briefing for you on the Cup of Nations. So I guess the first question is, why is it happening now? Why is it in this Christmas slot for the first time ever? And it really comes down to FIFA having screwed Africa. There's no other way of putting it. So from 1996, the Cup of Nations was regularly in a January-February time slot. That seemed to pretty much suit everybody, as some European clubs got frustrated. They lost players, but it wasn't a crucial time of the season. Those leagues that had winter breaks, often it was in the winter break. So it felt like the best time to have it. Why is it every 2 years? I guess it's a question we should address as well. And that's really because when the Cup of Nations launched in 1957, Africa shared one slot at the World Cup with Asia. So to get regular competitive football for CAF, which was growing rapidly at the time as more and more African countries became independent, they needed a regular tournament. So it didn't quite work as every 2 years. Sometimes it's every year, sometimes every 3 years. But basically, it's gone every 2 years through from 1957 to the present day. Now, obviously, a lot of European clubs and others would like it to be quadrennial, like the other confederational championships. But the problem is that the Cup of Nations really is the one way that African nations raise revenue. So if you are to take it every 4 years, you'd have to find a way to get more money for African football. Gianni Infantino has looked at various ways. His African Super League proposal, which now appears to be dead in the water after one edition, which involved only 6 teams, that was an attempt to do that. But realistically, the Cup of Nations is where African football makes its money. The Champions League, the African Champions League, it's a good tournament, but it doesn't generate anything like the interest or the revenues of the UEFA Champions League. But why has it been moved to this awkward time slot? Well, Issa Hayatou, the Cameroonian president of CAF for a long, long time, he was very good at taking on the Europeans and facing them down, saying, no, this is a result of colonialism. This is a result of what Europe has done to Africa. Therefore, we have to look after ourselves. We have to do our own thing. Now, he's a man with many faults, but I think in that regard, he was pretty admirable. He was toppled in 2017. The Malagasy Ahmed came in pretty hapless. He was deposed in March 2021, or replaced in March 2021 by the South African Patrice Motsepe. And Ahmed, he gave in to the Europeans. He said, no, okay, we'll move it into the European summer. We'll move it to June, July. And that began in 2019, the tournament in Egypt, and that worked fine. I mean, it was hot, but it wasn't excessively hot. That was just about okay. The problem came when 2021, the tournament went to Cameroon, and on the west side of the continent, you have the rainy season, and the rainy season happens in that June-July period. And you just cannot play football if there are several inches of rain. CAF seemed to recognise this very belatedly, but they did move the tournament. COVID got in the way as well, so that had been played January, February 2022. Ivory Coast should have been hosting in 2023, but they had this same problem with the rainy season, so that got moved to January, February 2024. Now, this tournament in Morocco, it should theoretically be the same as Egypt. There's no reason why it can't be in that June-July time slot, except that Gianni Infantino then invented his Extended Club World Cup, and so that took priority, and the Cup of Nations had to be moved. Okay, can they go to January, February? Ideally, they wouldn't do that in a World Cup year. It used to be in even-numbered years till 2012. That was the last one in an even-numbered year, or planned for an even-numbered year at least. But there was a sense those teams had qualified for World Cup. They weren't necessarily fully focused on the Cup of Nations. It meant players were being taken from their clubs twice in the same season. Now, FIFA regulations have changed. The clubs are only mandated to release players for one tournament per year. So clubs could have turned around and said, in the January-February tournament, no, your players are going to the World Cup, so we're not releasing them here. By beginning in December, A, they avoid the Champions League, the UEFA Champions League, which is now seeped into January, and B, they can say, no, this is a 2025 tournament, so the clubs have to release the players. However, As a sop to the club, FIFA have said, right, you don't have to release them 14 days beforehand, which is standard. You can release them 5 days beforehand. But actually, if you've got a game 3 or 4 days beforehand, you can come to your own arrangements with CAF. And that has caused an outcry, quite understandably, because how do you prepare a team in 2 weeks, let alone in 5 days? So I think the first games of the Cup of Nations at least could be even less predictable than normal as teams settle down. So that's part of the general sense of chaos. It's far from the only bit of chaos. So if you look down the list of teams, there's no Ghana, there's no Cape Verde, teams who qualified for the World Cup. So that's a little bit odd. The 2 of the 9 teams we know are going to the World Cup, plus DR Congo are in the Interconfederational Playoff in March. 2 of those 9.5 will not be there. You've also had, and we'll go into this in more detail just before they play, but Cameroon, for instance, Samuel Eto'o, who's the president of FECAFOOT, the Cameroonian Football Federation, he's continued his war with the sports ministry. He sacked the coach, Marc Brice, a Belgian, and Marc Brice went full George Costanza and refused to acknowledge that, and he named his own squad. So Cameroon, for a brief time, for about a week, they had 2 separate squads that were going to the Cup of Nations. They've both been submitted to CAF. That has now been resolved, but obviously a less than ideal situation. As I say, we'll talk about that more before Cameroon play their first game. Nigeria's coach Eric Shell hasn't been paid for 3 months. You may remember that Nigeria's players went on strike over bonuses before their World Cup playoff in November. So that's clearly a tense situation there behind the scenes. And then you look at the defending champions, Ivory Coast, and they're going to be without the entire 3-man forward line that won the final in Abidjan 2 years ago, or just under 2 years ago. So Max Guedel, who's the captain then, he's now 38, so it's not unreasonable that he's been stood down. Simon Adingra has really struggled for minutes, both at Brighton and after his move to Sunderland in the summer, so he's not included. And then Sébastien Haller last week was forced to withdraw with a hamstring problem, and he's been replaced by Aston Villa's Evan Guessin. So a lot of teams with a lot of issues. The tournament begins with Morocco versus Comoros, 7 p.m. UK time on Sunday night. Now that's at the Prince Moulay Abdallah Stadium in Rabat. Now that was only completed in September, but it's a genuinely remarkable looking stadium. It's very steep side. It doesn't have the running track that you often get in Africa. There is a separate athletic stadium in the same complex, which maybe is the best way to do it. But it looks like a stadium. It's got a capacity just under 70,000. It looks like it could have a really noisy atmosphere. It looks like a stadium that could generate a proper support for a home team. And if Morocco top their group, they are scheduled to be in that stadium throughout the knockout stage. So I'm pretty sure they will start well. I'm pretty sure that they will get through the group pretty comfortably. They're the favourites for the tournament. I think they're pretty obviously the best side in Africa. A couple of doubts. So they've only won 1 Cup of Nations before, which was back in 1976 in Ethiopia. So whether there's some psychological issue there, you never quite know. But of course they did get to the semi-final in Qatar in 2022 and thus became the first African team ever to reach the last 4 of a World Cup. I think Morocco now really have become the leading football nation in Africa. They've got by far the best infrastructure. So, for instance, they're 2 tournaments into a 3-tournament run of hosting the women's Afcon. They bid for the 2026 World Cup and I think presented more of a challenge to that North American bid than many thought likely. They should have hosted this tournament back in 2015, but fears over Ebola, particularly related to the Guinea squad and potentially Guinea fans, that led to them pulling out late and the tournament went to Equatorial Guinea. You look at their squad, it's clearly a very strong squad. Ashraf Hakimi is probably the outstanding player, I would say the best fullback in the world at the moment. But they've got experience through people like Sofiane Amrabat and Youssef El Nesri. But you've also got great young talent, emerging talent like Bilal El Kanous, Elise Ben Seguir and Chemstein Talbi. They've also won the last 3 Chans, that is the African Nations Championship, which is a tournament for domestic-based players. So that, I think, suggests strength in depth, maybe not so much, but certainly the grassroots strength of their football. They are producing players. I think what we saw under Walid Regragui, the coach at the World Cup, is that they're very good at sitting deep, at hitting better teams on the break. They put out Spain, they put out Portugal without conceding a goal in the last 16 and the quarter-final of that World Cup. Then in World Cup qualifying, they won 8 games out of 8, so they can overwhelm weaker opposition. Where there is maybe a slight doubt is what happens when they play against decent teams who are going to force them to make the running. Spain and Portugal obviously came onto them. They can overwhelm those lesser sides, but what happens to that sort of mid-range team who will let Morocco have the ball but will be harder to break down? So that is the one doubt. They start against Comoros, who are in their second Cup of Nations. Famously, they beat Ghana in 2021 in their third game of the group in that first Cup of Nations they qualified for, and went through to the last 16 where they lost to Cameroon. They're led by Stefano Cousin, very well-travelled Canadian. You may remember him, you probably won't, but you may remember him as assistant coach of Wolves. He's also been in charge of Congo, of South Sudan. He's been a host of clubs. So he worked in Serie C in Italy. He's worked in Palestine, in Iran, in South Africa, in UAE. A lot of experience. One of those great journeyman coaches you often find in Africa. His squad's largely drawn from the lower reaches of a French game. They had a decent start to World Cup qualifying. I mean, they beat Ghana, the only side to beat Ghana in World Cup qualifying, but they fell away rather after that. So I'd be surprised if they make the impact they did in 2021. I'd be very surprised if they get a result on Sunday night. But let's see. So enjoy that game, and I'll be back on Monday morning. We'll see you then.